Drakestone Milling Company presents the Deep Dive Podcast. Every Monday at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Okay, let's unpack this. There's this idea floating around in the sources. They call it a quiet revolution. It's not about protest marches, not really about asking for change from the powers that be. It's about building something new alongside the old. So today we're doing a deep dive into this concept of parallel systems. These structures that kind of pop up and operate next to the mainstream systems we all use. Systems that, let's be honest, often seem to be struggling. The core idea is pretty powerful, actually. Replacement, not resistance.
Exactly. And when we talk about parallel systems, we need to be clear what we mean. They are fundamentally non-state. They aren't institutional in the usual sense, and they're definitely not centralized. They run, like you said, in parallel. Think finance, education, how we get our food, law, data, even energy, all the big ones.
Right. The everyday infrastructure.
Precisely. And we see real examples, community barter networks where people trade skills or goods directly. Homeschooling co-ops are a big one. You even see folks developing local energy grids or these crypto-based microeconomies starting to take shape. And what's really interesting, beyond just being practical alternatives, is this idea of sovereignty. It's like people reclaiming responsibility, making their own choices, finding dignity outside systems that maybe feel imposed.
That's a really interesting layer. So our mission here for this deep dive is to figure out how these systems are actually used day to day. When do they tend to show up? Who's building them? And maybe crucially, how can anyone listening get involved, even if they don't feel like an expert? And, where are they already happening? Because the sources put forward this choice, it's pretty stark. Beg the broken or build the future. Let's get into it.
So what really jumps out is how practical these parallel systems are. The sources don't describe them as like philosophical concepts. They call them failure-proof backups.
Essential tools.
Yeah,
tools for navigating uncertainty, maybe even thriving when things get shaky.
That's absolutely key. And the sources break down these tools into different types. Economically, well, it's anything outside the usual government money, right?
Yep.
So Bitcoin comes up, sure, but also things like gold-backed trades or even just straightforward bartering labor for goods, skills for services, anything outside that traditional fiat system.
Which is vulnerable to, inflation and central control.
Exactly. Then logistically, you see things like private delivery networks springing up, co-op supply chains where communities band together to source things, private storage solutions, even shared manufacturing spaces. And informationally, this is huge too. Encrypted forums, independent media channels, self-hosted blogs.
Even old school stuff like books and pamphlets, right?
Yeah.
Keeping information alive offline.
Absolutely. Creating channels that, can't just be switched off by one central point of failure. And this isn't just theory. We've seen this work in history, showing some incredible resilience. Take Argentina, for example, during the peso collapse. When the national currency just cratered, did towns just fall apart? No, they quickly shifted to their own local currencies.
Wow, really?
Yeah, people were paying for groceries, rent, even medical bills, using these community-based systems. It wasn't just bare survival, it was commerce re-emerging on their own terms. Or think about Eastern Europe, when the centralized economies there started decaying. What happened? Private farms, informal networks, barter markets. They just quietly emerged and allowed people to build some wealth, keep families going completely outside the failing state system. And these weren't just temporary fixes, they actually reshaped the culture, made communities more interdependent, more local, maybe more frugal, but also more innovative. That's the failure-proof aspect. They just keep functioning.
So, okay, bringing it back to the listener, what does this all mean for you right now? It points to stuff you can actually do. The sources suggest things like maybe you start a small farm or a serious garden to secure your food source, become less reliant on fragile grocery chains. Or maybe instead of just relying on state schools, you team up with neighbors to teach history or critical thinking in your living room.
Tangible things.
Yeah, really tangible. Host a private delivery route in your neighborhood. Start a co-op clinic. The message seems to be, don't just protest the decline, prepare by building alternatives. That's how these systems get used. To survive, sure, but maybe also to build a stronger, more resilient culture along the way.
Okay, so if it's about building, not begging, that brings up a really critical point. Timing. When is the right time to start? The sources seem pretty adamant about this, don't they? Plant the seeds before the storm hits, not during or after. Oh, definitely. There's this great analogy they use. Building an off-grid solar setup. You don't wait until the power grid is down to start figuring it out, right?
Yeah.
You build it while the grid still works. You test it, you'll learn, you perfect it.
So when the lights go out, you're ready.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is that these parallel systems don't always start as, like, grand revolutionary acts. Often they're just adaptive. They emerge almost naturally when the mainstream ways of doing things start to, well, rot, as the sources put it, when systems become corrupt or just stop working efficiently.
It's just human nature to find another way.
It seems to be. We see this pattern again and again in history. Think about the fall of Rome, the Soviet collapse, even the 2008 financial crash. In all those cases, people kind of defaulted to building smaller, decentralized systems just to keep life going. They provided that continuity, that resilience when the official structures were failing. And the sources actually list specific signs of decay to watch for, things that suggest it's really time to start building, not just watching, like currency losing its value rapidly, debasement, widespread censorship, regulations becoming so complex they just stifle everything.
And war cycles, too, they mention those.
Yeah, geopolitical instability and war expansion. The insight here is that this decay isn't always random. It's often described as being sort of baked into the way current systems are set up, like it's on a timer. So this isn't just about reacting to temporary crises. It's about seeing a longer-term erosion and responding strategically. It's adaptation.
So for anyone listening, starting early isn't about being paranoid or overly pessimistic. It's just smart. It's strategy. And the message is pretty blunt. A system in decline doesn't really care about your complaints or petitions. What actually gives you power, and maybe what the old system fears, are these independent setups that just don't need its permission to exist. Okay, so we know what they are, roughly when to build them, but this next part feels critical. Who controls them? Who's in charge? Because the sources make a really strong point here. If you build something meant to be independent, but you let outsiders or the same old elites run it, well, it just gets captured, right?
It becomes part of the problem it was meant to solve.
Yeah. So the idea is your community owns it. That phrase from crypto really resonates here. You hold the keys, you hold the system. This feels like it gets to the heart of that sovereignty idea you mentioned.
Absolutely it does. Real control, genuine control, in these parallel systems comes from people directly owning and participating in them.
Right.
They have to be humanly scaled. That means systems you can actually understand and manage yourself with your neighbors. You typically see characteristics like voluntary membership, nobody's forced in. Transparent funding is key. Where does the money or resource come from? Where does it go? And crucially, a purpose that serves the community, the commons, not some external agenda.
There's a principle they mention, right? Something like,
Yeah, what you build, you own. What you use, you vote. What you maintain, you defend. It's very direct. This decentralized ownership is fundamental to why they're resilient. They can't easily be taken over or shut down from the outside. And historically, it's been a really diverse mix of people building these things. The sources mention, the expected outliers, maybe visionaries, anarchists, but also homesteaders, just regular people building self-sufficient lives, rogue business types operating outside the lines, black market traders filling essential gaps.
even organized religions sometimes step in.
Yes. Interestingly, organized religions have often created robust parallel social structures, support networks independent of the state. What's kind of counterintuitive is how these systems provide that stability precisely when the official systems are breaking.
Yeah.
It challenges the idea that only formal top-down structures can provide for people in tough times. They become the bedrock.
That's a powerful image. Okay, so maybe a listener is thinking, this sounds great, but what if I'm, minimally skilled? Do I need a PhD in crypto or engineering to join in?
Right, the credential barrier.
Yeah. But the good news, according to the sources, is that these systems are built by humans, right? Not robots. They really push back against what they call the systems lie, this idea that if you don't have the diploma, the certificate, you're basically useless.
That's such an important point. The big central systems love credentials. They want that piece of paper to define you. But these parallel systems, they value something different. As the sources say, real systems crave competency. It's about what you can do, your willingness to learn and contribute, not just what qualifications you have on paper. It completely reframes skill. It's not about degrees. It's about grit, willingness, helping each other out, mutual aid.
So how does someone actually start? What are the entry points?
They're surprisingly simple, actually. Know one practical skill. Teach it to one other person. That's a start. Host a swap meet in your neighborhood. Trade stuff, trade services. Volunteer for a local initiative. Maybe babysit for a fundraiser for that co-op clinic we mentioned. Got extra vegetables from your garden. Put an offer online to barter. Offer a weekend workshop on something you know, even if you think it's basic. Fixing bikes, basic coding, preserving food, whatever. Your existing knowledge, however small you think it is, has value and can be a building block. It's about reskilling the community, moving away from how sometimes legacy systems almost de-skill people.
It sounds like building horizontally. You know, everyone contributes what they can. You raise each other up, teach, learn, trade, go slow, but go deep. And those small actions, when people start coordinating, they scale up. That small garden swap could become a neighborhood food co-op. That Skillshare could become an alternative learning center. It creates real impact, maybe even direct economic flows outside the old system.
And what's really neat is how these systems scale with you. As you learn more, as your competence grows, the system can grow too. They aren't rigid structures imposed from the top down. They evolve organically based on the people involved. And that, the sources argue pretty strongly, is the real difference between building and begging. It's empowerment through doing, not waiting around for someone. Exactly. And they list very specific examples happening right now, often quietly. Homestead co-ops feeding families outside the big agribusiness machine. Crypto economies taking root locally, maybe using local tokens or mutual credit systems where values exchange without traditional money changing hands. It's like a community ledger.
We're seeing more private medicine too, right? Direct care, cash-only clinics.
Definitely. Direct primary care, cash-only clinics, telemedicine networks run by peers, all providing healthcare outside the big insurance and hospital conglomerates. Education pods, where parents are pooling resources to teach subjects like history or logic in ways they believe are more accurate or useful than the standard curriculum. Underground food networks, community farms, swapping produce, maybe little barter shops, private greenhouses. And critically, these decentralized media stacks, newsletters, independent blogs, zines, private audio channels, all operating outside corporate media control. It doesn't necessarily stop there. You start seeing the beginnings of private security co-ops in some areas, alternative building networks using different materials or methods, people setting up off-grid energy systems. The key thing is these often don't make headlines because, well, they don't ask permission. They just are.
They just exist under the radar.
Yeah, they grow quietly, building capacity, gaining strength, until maybe one day they're just the new normal for the people involved. Drakestone is mentioned as one example of what they call a repeatable node, like a hub, integrating several of these things. Food processing, energy, secure communication, a sort of functional blueprint others could potentially copy or adapt. These nodes might already exist near you, waiting to be discovered or built upon.
Right. So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you, the listener? It really seems to circle back to agency, your own power to choose and act. The fundamental question shifts, doesn't it? It moves away from a passive, what should I do or how do I escape, to something much more active. Something like, what kind of system will I help build and what kind of system will I and my community inherit?
That's the absolute heart of it. It's about flipping the questions you ask. So instead of how do I avoid paying taxes, maybe the question becomes how do I reliably feed, warm, educate, and defend my own family and community? Instead of just wondering, is Bitcoin a good investment? Maybe it's, can I actually live on Bitcoin or something like it? And how do I bridge it to the old system when needed? Or shifting from, can I open a private clinic to, okay, how do I launch my clinic? The sources are really direct here. These parallel systems don't need more preachers. They need builders. They need participants. It's about reclaiming that responsibility and dignity, refusing to be just a passive recipient of whatever the central systems offer. It asks, do you trust the central planners, or will you get your hands dirty building something that reflects your actual values?
So the advice seems to be, start small, but start. Build a barter circle with neighbors, host that weekend seminar, plant the garden, teach one person one useful thing, offer tutoring in something you understand, like crypto, and then turn those actions into habits. Repeat them. Let them grow into local infrastructure that actually serves people.
Because that is how you genuinely confront systemic decay or collapse. Not just with hope, which can be passive, or with complaints directed at a center that might not be listening, but with creation, with building something tangible. Because at the end of the day, the sources suggest the center probably won't save you. But your system, the one you helped build, that might. That's the ethical call.
So the final question we leave you with is, what's your next move?
Check out the Drakestone Milling Company store.